Adaobi stepped out of the car at the school's gate, her heart beating fast. Even though she was from a rich family, today she wasn't wearing her usual expensive clothes. Instead, she had on an old pair of shoes, a plain skirt, and a shirt that looked much too simple for someone like her. She tugged nervously at the edges of her face mask, covering most of her face. The mask wasn't just for health reasons, it was part of her disguise. No one at this school would know she was the daughter of Chief Nwosu, one of the wealthiest men in town. She took a deep breath and walked through the school gate, blending in with the other students. As she walked through the crowded schoolyard, students buzzed around her, chatting and laughing. Adaobi kept her head down, feeling the curious eyes of other students on her. Some of them whispered as she passed, probably wondering why the new girl was covering her face. But that was exactly what she wanted. She wasn't here to impress anyone or flaunt her family's wealth. She had left behind her life of luxury for this very reason. Adaobi wanted to see who would like her for who she really was, not because of her last name or her father's money. Ahead of her stood the large school building, tall and old, with fading paint and a few cracked windows. Adaobi's steps slowed as she neared the entrance, her nerves kicking in. She clutched the straps of her backpack tightly, taking a deep breath. This was her fresh start. She had to keep her identity a secret, at least until she found what she was looking for: true friendship and maybe even love. For now, all she had to do was make it through the first day without anyone discovering who she really was. Adaobi sat on her large plush bed, staring at the floor. Her bedroom was more like a luxurious suite, with polished wooden floors, a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, and expensive furniture surrounding her. The room was filled with beautiful things, designer bags, perfumes, and jewelry. But Adaobi didn't feel happy. She felt trapped. Every time she looked around, she was reminded that people only saw her for her family's wealth. Sighing, she ran her fingers through her long braids, thinking about the choice she had made. On the desk beside her bed was a photograph of her and her parents. Her father, Chief Nwosu, was a well-known businessman who had given her everything she could ever want. But despite all the material things, Adaobi longed for something more meaningful. Real connections, real friendships, and maybe even love. She wasn't sure if anyone would ever truly care for her as a person, or if they were only interested in her wealth. That's why she decided to pretend to be poor. It was risky, but it was the only way she could find out who would like her for who she really was. Adaobi stood up and walked to the mirror on the other side of the room. She looked at her reflection. Her smooth brown skin, dark eyes, and perfect features stared back at her. Without the face mask, she was stunning, and she knew it. But that wasn't what mattered to her anymore. With a deep breath, she pulled out the face mask from her pocket and covered her face again. This mask would hide her identity and her wealth, allowing her to blend in at school. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back now. Adaobi entered the classroom quietly, trying not to draw attention to herself. The classroom was buzzing with chatter as students prepared for the day. She kept her face mask on, covering her nose and mouth, making her almost unrecognizable. Her simple clothes didn't stand out either. She found a seat at the back of the class, where she hoped no one would notice her. As she sat down, she could feel a few curious glances from her classmates, but no one said anything. She sighed with relief, happy to have avoided any confrontation on her first day. As the teacher walked into the classroom, the noise quickly died down. Adaobi straightened up, pulling out her notebook and pen. She kept her head down, listening to the teacher introduce the topic for the day. Occasionally, she would glance up from behind her mask, watching the other students. They were dressed in their neat school uniforms, laughing and chatting when the teacher wasn't looking. Adaobi wondered if any of them would ever notice her for who she was, or if she would remain just the quiet, masked girl at the back of the class. Suddenly, the teacher called on her to introduce herself. Adaobi froze for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected to be noticed so soon. Slowly she stood up, keeping her face mask in place. "My name is Adaobi," she said quietly. Her voice was soft but clear. "I'm new here." The classroom was silent for a few seconds before the teacher smiled and moved on to the next student. Adaobi sat down quickly, her cheeks burning under the mask. She hadn't said much, but she knew that now people would start paying attention to her. During the break, Adaobi quietly slipped out of the classroom and made her way to a quiet corner of the school courtyard. The courtyard was lively, filled with groups of students laughing, talking, and eating their snacks. She found a bench under a tall tree and sat down, pulling out a small sandwich from her bag. Her eyes scanned the busy scene, but she kept to herself, not wanting to draw any attention. The breeze gently moved her braids as she sighed softly, feeling a little lonely. She wondered if she could really pull off this disguise without anyone suspecting her real identity. Just as she was about to take a bite of her sandwich, a boy from her class walked up to her. His name was Chinedu, and he had a friendly smile on his face. "Hey, mind if I sit here?" he asked, pointing to the empty space beside her. Adaobi hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She shifted slightly to make room for him. "I'm Chinedu," he said as he sat down, still smiling. Adaobi gave him a small nod, her mask hiding her nervous expression. "I know you're new here, right? Thought I'd come and say hi." Adaobi didn't know how to respond at first, so she just smiled behind her mask. "Yeah, I'm new," she said softly. She didn't want to reveal too much, but Chinedu didn't seem to mind. He started talking about the school, telling her about the different teachers and students, making jokes to make her feel comfortable. After a while, Adaobi began to relax. She realized that Chinedu wasn't trying to impress her or ask about her background. He was just being friendly. For the first time since she had arrived, Adaobi felt a little less lonely, thinking maybe it wouldn't be so hard to make a real friend after all. It was lunch break, and Adaobi found herself in the noisy, crowded school cafeteria. The sound of clattering plates and excited chatter filled the air. Adaobi picked up a simple meal of rice and beans, trying to keep up the appearance of an ordinary student. As she made her way through the sea of students, she felt out of place. Despite her mask, her posture and aura still carried the quiet grace of someone raised in luxury. But she kept her head down, hoping no one would notice. She spotted Chinedu across the room, sitting with a group of students and laughing. Just as Adaobi was about to reach an empty table in the corner, another girl bumped into her, sending her tray crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the cafeteria, and suddenly all eyes were on her. Adaobi's face burned with embarrassment under her mask as she knelt down to pick up the mess. The girl who had bumped her, a tall girl named Amaka, stood over her with an annoyed expression. "Watch where you're going," Amaka said harshly, barely offering to help. Adaobi bit her lip, not wanting to make a scene, and silently picked up her scattered food. Before Adaobi could react, Chinedu quickly rushed over to help her. He knelt beside her, picking up pieces of the tray and handing them back to her with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I've got you," he said softly. Amaka rolled her eyes and walked away, clearly uninterested in helping. Adaobi thanked Chinedu quietly, grateful for his kindness. As they stood up together, the noise in the cafeteria slowly returned to normal. But Adaobi couldn't shake the feeling that she had drawn more attention than she wanted. Still, as she looked at Chinedu's kind expression, she felt a little less alone. After the lunch incident, Adaobi walked down the school hallway, feeling the weight of eyes on her. As she passed groups of students, she could hear soft whispers and giggles. Her heart sank as she realized they were talking about her. Despite the mask on her face, she felt exposed, as if they could see right through her disguise. She kept her head down, trying to move quickly through the crowded hallway. Her long braids swayed behind her as she walked, but her usually graceful posture was now stiff with tension. Among the whispers, Adaobi heard some students saying things like, "Who is that girl? And why does she always wear that mask?" A few of the more popular students, like Amaka and her friends, leaned against the lockers, laughing. Amaka rolled her eyes when Adaobi walked by, clearly still annoyed from the lunch incident. "I bet she's hiding something," Amaka said loudly enough for Adaobi to hear. Adaobi's heart raced, but she kept walking, refusing to let them see how much their words affected her. She was determined not to break her cover. Just as Adaobi was nearing the end of the hallway, Chinedu caught up to her. He walked beside her, giving her a comforting smile. "Ignore them," he said softly. "They don't know anything about you." Adaobi glanced at him, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time that day, she felt like someone was truly on her side. Chinedu's calm presence made her feel a little more at ease as they walked together toward their next class. She was still nervous, but at least she knew she wasn't completely alone in this new school. Later that day, Adaobi found herself in the school library, seeking refuge from the constant stares and whispers of her classmates. The library was quiet, with only the soft rustle of pages and the occasional cough breaking the silence. Rows of bookshelves stretched in every direction, offering a peaceful escape from the chaotic world outside. Adaobi walked slowly through the aisles, her fingers brushing lightly against the spines of the books as she looked for something interesting to read. The calmness of the library allowed her to relax, even if just for a little while. Here, behind her face mask, she could hide in plain sight. As Adaobi settled into a quiet corner of the library with a book, she noticed someone approaching. It was one of the boys from her class, a tall, quiet student named Emeka. He was often seen studying alone, and today was no different. He glanced at Adaobi curiously, clearly wondering why she was sitting alone. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, pointing to the empty seat across from her. Adaobi hesitated but nodded, unsure of what to expect. Emeka sat down and opened a thick textbook, quickly becoming absorbed in his reading. Adaobi, feeling slightly awkward, turned her attention back to her own book. After a few minutes of quiet, Emeka broke the silence. "I've seen you around," he said softly, not looking up from his book. "You're new here, right?" Adaobi nodded, still unsure of how much to reveal. "Yeah," she replied quietly. Emeka didn't press her for more details, which was a relief. Instead, he simply continued reading, occasionally glancing up at her from behind his glasses. Adaobi was surprised by how comfortable the silence between them felt. She had expected more questions, but Emeka seemed content just sharing the quiet space with her. For the first time that day, Adaobi felt a sense of calm. The school day had ended, and Adaobi walked to a nearby park to unwind. The park was filled with trees and flowers, with a peaceful pond in the center. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the grass, and the soft breeze carried the smell of fresh flowers. Adaobi found a quiet bench under a large tree where she could sit and clear her mind. She took off her face mask, finally able to breathe freely in the open air. Here, away from the school, she didn't have to worry about anyone recognizing her. She closed her eyes for a moment, soaking in the calmness of nature. As Adaobi sat in the park, she heard footsteps approaching. She opened her eyes and was surprised to see Shinedu walking toward her. He was clearly as surprised as she was, not expecting to run into anyone from school. "I didn't know you come here too," he said, with a friendly smile. Adaobi, startled but happy to see him, smiled back. "It's my favorite place to relax after school," she replied. Chinedu nodded, looking around at the peaceful surroundings. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. Adaobi hesitated for a second, but then nodded, allowing him to sit next to her. For a few minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the ducks swim in the pond. Chinedu broke the silence with a soft laugh. "It's funny," he said. "I see you at school, but I feel like I don't really know you." Adaobi glanced at him, unsure how much to reveal. "I guess I'm just a private person," she said quietly, glancing down at her hands. Chinedu didn't push for more. Instead, he leaned back on the bench and said, "That's okay. We all have our secrets." His words made Adaobi feel more at ease. She smiled slightly, grateful for his understanding. The next morning, Adaobi arrived at school earlier than usual. The sun was just rising, casting a soft orange glow over the school courtyard. The school grounds were mostly empty, except for a few students trickling in. Adaobi adjusted her face mask and tucked her braids under her hoodie, trying to remain as unnoticed as possible. She wanted to avoid any more attention after yesterday's events. As she made her way to class, she felt a familiar sense of dread in the pit of her stomach, fearing that more people might have started talking about her strange habits. As she approached her classroom, Adaobi overheard a group of students talking near the entrance. Among them was Amaka, still bitter from the lunch incident. I heard someone say she's hiding her face because she's actually rich.
Drop your comment at the comment section below and don't forget to like, subscribe and share. See you on the next episode. Bye for now.